My name's Mark Strachan. I'm a consultant in diabetes and endocrinology here in Edinburgh at the Western General Hospital. I'm also an honorary professor in the University of Edinburgh. So, well, fundamentally diabetes is a state where levels of sugar in the blood are elevated. That's the fundamental of diabetes. There are many different forms of diabetes though, and they all ultimately hook around the hormone insulin. So insulin is the hormone made in the pancreas gland, which in health reduces blood sugar levels. And the different forms of diabetes either cause an absolute lack of insulin. So for example, type 1 diabetes, which is the well-known form that occurs in particularly children and young adults. In type 1 diabetes, there is the body's immune system attacks the cells in the pancreas that make insulin and causes this absolute lack of insulin. Other forms of diabetes are a consequence of insulin not working properly. So we call that insulin resistance. And the classic form of that would be the most common form of diabetes, which is type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes tends to be associated with obesity and with increasing age. And obesity in particular, by mechanisms that we don't fully understand, makes people more insulin resistant. So they make insulin, but it just doesn't work properly. And that then leads to blood sugar levels rising. The consequence of those rising blood sugars can be devastating for the individual. So high blood sugars essentially attack the blood vessels in the body. And so people with type 2 diabetes in particular are at a much higher risk of heart disease and stroke. They're much higher risk of having a lower limb amputation. All people with diabetes are at increased risk of sight-threatening eye changes. Diabetes used to be one of the commonest forms of blindness in the world. Diabetes also causes kidney failure. So elevation in blood glucose, if not tackled, will lead to very serious complications for the individual. The reality is, because of cars, because of because of ease of public transport, just as societies we become physically less and less active, and then when you add in ready-made processed foods that are high in fat, high in salt content, it's a recipe for disaster. Pardon the pun. If you go back, if you take the historical context, if you go back to the 17th, 18th, 19th century, type 2 diabetes as a condition barely existed because people didn't live long enough to develop type 2 diabetes, but also obesity was very uncommon. It was only the wealthiest members of society that had access to enough food to develop sufficient obesity to then develop type 2 diabetes. So type 2 diabetes was not an unknown condition, but it wasn't a very common condition. Well, I think the key thing I would say about type 2 diabetes is that it is firstly preventable, and secondly it is reversible. So we know that if somebody has type 2 diabetes and they are able to lose weight, then their diabetes can go into remission, long-term remission.